What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and this time I'm going to be discussing an issue that comes up when using a controller on Gran Turismo 7, and I'll also be showing you the best way to get around it. This problem can cost you upwards of half a second a lap on tracks with a lot of hairpins, but with the trick I'm going to show you, you can cut that down to a tenth of a second or less. But before we get started, if you enjoy videos like these, please like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. With that being said, let's get started. So, if you haven't seen this issue in my previous videos already, there's an issue with the controller's steering response on Gran Turismo 7, particularly in slow corners. The game filters your controller inputs so that you don't turn too much and scrub off speed or start sliding, and while it does a good job of that most of the time, it really hurts your turn-in on slow corners, even with maximum sensitivity settings. Unfortunately, there's not really anything you can do to fix this behavior with control settings. However, there is one thing you can do to get around this, and that involves using the handbrake. Yes, you heard that right, we're using the handbrake, and no, I'm not going to be drifting here. But basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to abuse the handbrake to force the car to turn more. The game doesn't give us the steering angle we need, so this is required to get enough rotation to get through corners as fast as possible. This may sound a bit odd, and it might be frowned upon by some because it's not really a realistic application of a handbrake, but until there are changes made to this, I'm in full support of people doing this, since there's nothing else you can do about it, and it's really not fair that you're forced to be slower just because you don't have a steering wheel. Now, let's go over a direct comparison of handbrake versus no handbrake. I'm going to use my Nissan GT-R Nismo on Deep Forest Raceway from the Nations Cup, since the issue was extremely obvious here. If anyone is interested in this setup, I'll have it linked in the description. First, I'm going to set a lap for a baseline without the handbrake, and then I'll show a hairpin run with the handbrake compared to the no handbrake Ghost. So that time by I ran a 27.9. Not a perfect lap by any means, but good enough for this purpose. The hairpin run was fairly clean for a controller, so that'll work. Now let's look at my handbrake run. You can see that I'm actually a bit over a tenth down going into the hairpin this time, but watch the HUD for my handbrake input, and then watch how much faster the car turns and sets itself up to apply throttle on exit. So even though I was over a tenth down on the 127.9 into the hairpin, I finished a lap with a 127.6, so I gained 4 tenths just from grabbing the handbrake and forcing the car to rotate more than the controller would allow us to. If I'd found this out while tuning this car, I would have been pretty comfortable in the top 10 stars of this event, so it makes a pretty huge difference, especially when sometimes you're fighting for hundredths at the top level. One thing to note is that this also works when using a wheel. You'll get even more rotation that way, and as long as you keep it under control, you can gain some time on wheel too, but the difference between using it and not using it is much smaller than it is on controller, where the difference is night and day. Also, this isn't exclusive to hairpins. I've seen drivers tap the handbrake in long sweeping turns that they can't quite take flat, and while I haven't experimented with this myself, and I think the difference is probably not as noticeable as at low speeds, it's definitely a thing, so just keep that in mind if you ever come across it. Now that you've seen how much time you can gain from this, I'm going to mention a few important things that I had to learn to make it work properly. If you mess it up, it'll lose you more time than if you never touched it at all. So if you want to do this, you need to make sure you're doing it right. First, we'll cover four-wheel drive cars. The handbrake shouldn't really change its behavior here versus a rear-wheel drive or a front-wheel drive car, but it does in the game, so we have to account for it. In four-wheel drive cars, you have to be off the normal brake completely for this to work, or it won't help you rotate. Notice in my run here that I'm completely off the normal brake before attempting to use the handbrake. If you try it while braking still, the car just goes straight and the handbrake isn't helping you. Also, you need to hold the handbrake fairly long to get the right amount of rotation. Watch how long I hold the handbrake here in a four-wheel drive car, and keep that in mind as we look at a rear-wheel drive example. Next, we'll show the Audi R8 LMS, a rear-wheel drive car, on the circuit experience for this track. You can see on this run without the handbrake that I got through the corner pretty well, because the car actually turns a lot off throttle, so the controller issue here is minimized. A 27.8 is alright here. I could get some more time out of it, but it's solid enough for now. This time, we're going to handbrake against the 27.8 Ghost. Watch how much faster my input on the handbrake is here. As I get through the corner, right when I hit the point of understeer, I just barely tap the handbrake, and it's enough to rotate the car and set me up better for the exit. This is one of the best cars I've driven on controller with respect to getting through the hairpin, and handbraking is still at least a tenth or two quicker. So if your goal is to be competitive in sport mode, I think learning how to handbrake and hairpins is a must. Just in case you're wondering about how it works in front-wheel drive cars, it's pretty much the same as rear-wheel drive, but with the added element of using the throttle to straighten the car back out. It can be a bit of a balancing act here, but as long as you just tap it like in rear-wheel drive, you should be alright. Now what happens if I get it wrong with the handbrake? Let's talk about a few different scenarios here. First, if you don't use it enough, then it just won't help you turn, which makes sense. Also, if you use it too long, you'll spin the car around, which I'm sure many of you guessed too. There's also a matter of timing. If you do it too early, you'll upset the car because you're not doing it on the right line at the right speed, and you'll lose more time than not using it at all. Likewise, if you do it too late, you might be going too slow or already be too straight for it to be helpful, and you'll just upset or even spin the car. Using this effectively is all about knowing when to do it and for how long. So once you get the hang of that, you can start to use this reliably and cut down on your lap times on controller considerably. But that's all I've got for this time, guys, so let me know your thoughts on this down in the comments, and if you have any further questions on how this works, please post those in the comments as well. As always, if you find my videos helpful, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks.